Hey, what's up guys? I'm going to be looking at a fascinating case from 2014, which was fairly well known, but I do believe I found a triangular UFO that nobody has pointed out before in one of the pilot's photos. So this is a series of photos taken from an airplane pilot flying over the Pacific in 2014 who just happened to see a lot of glowing shapes in the water below him, and the air was also full of a green light, he describes. I believe it's like an aurora borealis, green glowing light. But what's most interesting, of course, are these glowing shapes that he took a few photos of in the water as he flew over them. But before I start looking at these images, this is the photo in which I found a UFO that I don't believe anyone has pointed out before. So take a second and see if you can spot it. No? Well, I'll zoom into it. First, I'll zoom into this red glow on the horizon, because this is obviously the topic, the subject of his photo, rather. He's taken a photo of the red glow that he's approaching on the horizon. Alright, so zooming back out, you might think that I was referring to this shape in the top right, so I'll zoom into this for a second. Now, if this was an object in the sky, this would be pretty interesting, but I don't believe that it is. I think this is just the edge of his airplane window showing up. Rather, I think it's the reflection of the edge of his airplane window. So that's what I think this is right here. So I'll zoom out one more time, see if you can spot anything else that seems to be a UFO. If you were looking in the top left, you've got it. Now this could not be enhanced very well. I will be manipulating the colors and the light levels in just a second, but I will say off the bat that this does not really become clarified very nicely, mainly because it's just so small inside of this huge image. I mean, just look at how small it is. So I can brighten it up a little bit, but this is rather too small to really be clarified very nicely or cleanly. However, I think this is a very compelling little sighting, regardless that it can't be clarified very well. And if you look at the stars around it, you can get a general sense of how clear this is. I mean, it looks crystal clear when you zoom out, but when you zoom into a tiny little spot, I think the stars are showing a little bit of motion blur, actually, because they look a little bit stretched out horizontally. So I think they're showing a little bit of motion blur, although this triangular shape does not seem to be showing that kind of motion blur, at least as far as I can tell. It does not seem blurred or stretched out like some of the stars do. So the lack of motion blur might actually suggest that this object was traveling at the same speed or keeping in pace with the airplane, possibly. So I'm going to be attempting to brighten up the image a little bit. Like I said, it really can't be enhanced very cleanly, but it can be brightened up a bit at the very least. This is showing, when I brighten it up like this, it shows how there's kind of some artifacts that show up around the stars as well as this object. And it would seem that there's just a faint outline of light sort of tracing around the objects that are emitting light in this photo. So I can't really get around that. This is just zooming out just to show the full image for a second. So it still looks good. You can see the triangular object in the top left sort of stands out a little bit more right now. So I'll zoom back in. But like I said, I can't really get rid of this slight outline that seems to be appearing around the object and around most of the stars as well. So when I make it much brighter, the artifacts tend to be a little bit overbearing. However, if I increase the dark colors as well, we should get sort of an extra saturated image of everything. And some of those trace artifacts will go away too. So the object really looks solid and three-dimensional to me. So here's that same photo zoomed out. It's still brightened up, and take a look at that top left. You can see that triangular craft about as clearly as possible. And I will just zoom in, and I want to say that I believe the side of it, I believe we're looking at a triangle, a three-dimensional triangular craft, and I believe we can make out sort of the side having black marks along the side of it. I can't say if those would be windows or part of the machinery or what, but there do seem to be black marks along the side of this three-dimensional object that's floating in the sky. So that's about all I can say and about all I can do with this particular part of the picture. So I'm going to go back to discussing the orange lights in the water. Here's another photo of approaching the lights in the water. And here's another one approaching the lights, getting closer. Now this photo shows the airplane actually flying right over the lights, and this photo is probably the one that is most frequently shown in association with this case. However, this is the best photo associated with this case. And I'm actually using the pilot's website. If you look at the bottom left corner, this is the name of his website, and I'll put a link below. It's a photography website actually, and he's an airplane pilot who has a passion for photography. So it's an awesome site. Definitely check it out. And the pilot actually provides two versions of this one photo. This is the brighter version, and I'll just zoom out again, but take note of all the different colors you can see here. There's definitely yellow, orange, and red, but look at these lights in the upper right section of the lights. What color is that? At a glance you might think it was yellow, but if you really look, I think it's a light green, and this actually shows up even better in the other version of the photo provided on the pilot's photography website. So let me just zoom out one more time. Alright, I thought if I double clicked it would zoom out. So there it is, zoomed out, and I will switch to the darker version provided by him. Alright, so this is the darker version provided by the pilot's website, and he's actually enhanced the colors better than I managed to do by myself, so I'm really not going to be changing the colors or the light with these photos. But this darker version here, from the pilot himself and edited by him, this really brings out the green in these lights in the top right section of lights. So I can only zoom in so far before it all becomes a bunch of pixels. So that's about this point right here, but hopefully you can see that these are green. This is sort of an LED green color. Over here as well, a nice bright green. Right here would look to be more of a yellowish green, or maybe that's just yellow. I'm not the best at identifying colors, actually, but I can see that those are green lights in the water, and it's fascinating. Zooming in to the other side of the photo, there are a few more of these green lights right up here that I'm circling with the mouse cursor. Can't really zoom in any more than that, but there's at least that one more bright green light right there. So let me just zoom out again. Like I said, this is the very best photo associated with this case, and I really can't enhance it any better than the gentleman did already. Just an amazing photo. Now, the typical mundane explanation for this case is that the lights are from volcanoes under the water, which would make sense if these were just red, orange, and yellow lights, just warm colors, in other words, but underwater volcanoes are not going to explain away these green lights. So there's definitely something more interesting going on. Okay, finally, this is the last photo that is part of the case, and I love this photo, but it does have a lot of reflections on the window that are showing up in this photo. So this is automatically the most confused photo of all of them, because it's just kind of a jumble of a few different images that are showing up. So I'm not going to point out every single thing that is shown in this photo. I will just say that a lot of the images are reflections from the interior of the plane. Hopefully you can see the cursor of my mouse. Right here I'm tracing over a dark line that I believe is the dividing line at the bottom of the window. So everything above this dark line that I'm tracing with my cursor, everything above it is the window, I believe, and everything below it is the physical interior of the craft. Okay, so this spot right here is showing the reflection from the interior of the craft, but also it's showing the reflections from the water, which are passing by on the glass. So definitely it's a bit confusing, but it's still an awesome image, and I will be zooming in and brightening it up in just a second. Let me just point out on the right here, I believe this is a direct image of the interior of his plane. And then this heavy, thick dividing section would be the edge of his window and the parts of the plane around it. Alright, so now this part that I'm circling is the window with some very heavy reflections of the interior of the craft, including some monitor screens showing up, some little tiny lights. I don't know if this would be called the dashboard, but it's a dashboard-like section of the inside of the plane which is showing up. And then I believe this is actually the photographer himself showing up in this glare image right here. More reflections from the inside of the plane over here. This, I believe, is one of the interior lights showing up as a reflection. This would be the glare of the interior light showing up as a reflection in the window. So I actually did just go over just about everything. Jumbled image, but very fascinating. I want to call your attention to the left side of the image here, where I am circling my cursor. This is a cross-like light, which I believe is genuinely outside of the craft. So I will zoom in on that as much as I can. Because of how this image is structured, there's not going to be any definite proof of anything coming from this photo. However, that would appear to be a cross-like object or a star-like object that is just showing up as a cross, but still very beautiful and interesting. Okay, I am brightening up this image right now, and I actually take back my analysis that I had just explained right before this part here, because I'm not seeing the image the same way that I was before. I thought these lights were passing, I thought these were reflections of lights passing over structures of his airplane, because that's what it looks like in certain areas. Like this looks like there's a big part with the lights, with the reflections of the lights passing over it. But no, I don't think so anymore. I think these are the lights in the water that he's photographing. I just think that we're just catching a lot of heavy reflections around the edges of the window. So I believe these are the lights in the water, like I said, and I don't think they're passing over any structures of the plane. I think they're just passing over the reflections of the interior of the plane. So that's what I think now, and I'll see if I can get this any more clear or not. Like I said, it's a jumble of different images, but still an awesome photo. And I want to also point out how crazy the clouds look in all these photos. If you haven't noticed that, go back and check out the other photos. All the clouds are very crazy, sort of a glowing neon pink or purple in this photo, and in the previous ones they had like a glowing orange look to them. At the very least, they're being lit up from the lights in the water. So those are all the photos of the case. Very, very fascinating. Let me know what you guys think these lights are. I love this photo because you can see the green, this very bright green circular light. Now I know some people are going to accuse that of being one of the light reflections from inside the craft, from inside the plane. However, if I'm seeing this right, if this darker layer right here, if this is really the edge of the window, then everything above it is not part of the plane. It's just reflections of the inside of the plane. So if that's true, then this is just passing over reflections of the inside of the plane. And also, we would have to have sort of a series of lights right about here to be reflected in the window right here. So the absence of any lights right here would seem to show that these lights are all outside of his plane. That's how I'm interpreting this jumbled image anyway. For those that have noticed these two triangular formations of lights, I believe these are clearly some kind of section of lights inside the plane, which means that this right here is just a reflection of this part here. And again, it also helps show that these lights must be outside of the craft because there's nothing inside that correlates with those lights to make a reflection. This is showing, these triangular lights are showing the principle of reflection from the inside of the plane to the window, but it's also showing that there's no other lights inside the plane to explain away the rest of the lights in the window. So very fascinating image, very fascinating series of images. I definitely do not believe these are volcano lights because, well, mainly because some of them are green and volcano illuminations just can't be green. So let me know what you guys think.